Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm presenting some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular installment is on William Shakespeare's play, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. Here, I'll take a look at the plot of Hamlet in relation to the Elizabethan revenge tragedy. Revenge tragedy was arguably the most popular form of play on the London stage during Shakespeare's lifetime, and one of the first of these plays became the prototype model for dozens of plays that would follow. That was a play called The Spanish Tragedy, probably written by Thomas Kyd sometime in the late 1580s. Here are some of the key elements. First, at the beginning of the play, there has been a murder. The protagonist, the revenge hero, has lost a friend or a family member, but he will not know who was the murderer. And he may not even know for certain that it was a murder rather than an accident. As the drama unfolds, this grieving victim, the revenge hero, passes through a trajectory of grief, mourning, confusion, and possible insanity before gaining full awareness and taking action to achieve his revenge at the end of the play. By the end of the play, the original villain will be killed in a fashion that is aesthetically appropriate. The revenge will match, in some way, the original crime. The villain will be made to know who is killing him and why he is being killed. And the revenge must be carried out before a public audience. The community within the play must come to learn the truth about the original crime, and that way to share the revenger's grief. And all of this is enormously entertaining. It's a sort of detective story. Now I'll turn to a scene-by-scene synopsis of the plot with some remarks on the relationship of Hamlet to the Spanish tragedy and other plays in the revenge tragedy genre. The play opens on a scene of guards standing watch over the castle at Elsinore. We learn that they have seen a strange apparition the night before, and they talk about whether they will see it again. It's a ghost of the recently deceased King of Denmark, Hamlet's father, old King Hamlet. One of the watchmen has brought along Hamlet's friend Horatio in order that he might see the ghost as well and inform Hamlet. Indeed, the ghost does appear again, and Horatio speaks to it, but the ghost remains silent at the end of Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 2 opens on the setting of the royal court with King Claudius, the brother of the deceased King Hamlet, and his queen Gertrude, the widow of the former king. Claudius conducts some routine court business, and then we meet Laertes, the son of Polonius, a counselor to the king. The appearance of Laertes begins a subplot. Laertes, like the young Hamlet, is a college student. He has returned from university in Paris to attend the funeral of the old King Hamlet and the wedding of Claudius and Gertrude. Among other things, the importance of this subplot is to develop Laertes as a foil, a character contrasting to Hamlet. Laertes gains permission to return to Paris. Then Claudius turns to Hamlet and asks him why he seems so out of sorts, why he seems so depressed. Hamlet responds, bantering and in a way taunting Claudius for having replaced his father as king and having married Gertrude. Finally, Gertrude entreats Hamlet not to return to university at Wittenberg, but to stay a while at the court at Elsinore, and Hamlet agrees, perhaps grudgingly. All the other characters leave the stage, and Hamlet alone remains to speak his first soliloquy to the audience. In this soliloquy, Hamlet gives us some insight into his state of mind, and he broaches some themes that will be elaborated further in the play. First, we learn that he is depressed, even suicidal, but he doesn't mention anything about grieving his father's death here. Instead, he complains about his mother's hasty remarriage to his uncle. A little month, or ere those shoes were old with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why she, even she, married with my uncle, my father's brother, yet no more like my father than I to Hercules. Here, Hamlet may be disgusted with himself. He's disgusted with humanity in general. Most of all, he's disgusted with his mother. But at the end of Act 1, in Scene 4, he will meet the ghost and learn a truth that will set him on a course of action, on a course of revenge. Returning to the battlements among the watchmen with his friend Horatio, they wait for the ghost to appear, and when he does, the ghost speaks to Hamlet, telling him that he was murdered by his own brother. The ghost charges Hamlet to revenge his murder. Act 2, Scene 1 concerns the subplot. Laertes is returning to Paris, and his father, Polonius, has sent a servant, Reynaldo, after Laertes to spy on him and make sure he stays out of trouble. In the following scene, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two of Hamlet's mates from the University of Wittenberg, show up unexpectedly at Elsinore. When Hamlet asks them how they happen to be there, they have trouble answering, and he soon discovers that they were sent for by Claudius and Gertrude. They are there to spy on him. This sinister atmosphere of mistrust, the spying, continue in Act 3, Scene 1, the famous nunnery scene, when Polonius directs his daughter Ophelia, who has been in a romantic relationship with Hamlet, to draw him out in a conversation, as Polonius and Claudius will spy on their conversation unseen. Hamlet may be aware of what's going on, or he may not, but in any case, he breaks into a tirade, ranting at Ophelia about the disgusting venality of all women, ending with his admonition to her to get herself to a nunnery. One way of reading that statement is simply to say he's urging her never to marry. He is still upset, obviously, about his mother's marriage to Claudius. But also there's a double entendre, because nunnery was a euphemism, a slang term for a house of prostitution, a brothel in Shakespeare's time. Is he performing for an audience, for Polonius and Claudius, whom he knows are spying on him? Or is he simply stating his true feelings? It can be played either way, or both at the same time. This theme of misogyny, this attitude of extreme disgust for women, is a recurrent theme in the revenge tragedy. Yet, however much disgusted he is with his mother and with Ophelia, his more immediate purpose is to revenge his father's death. But can he really trust a ghost? Perhaps this ghost is a demon, tempting him to commit a sin, to seek revenge from someone who's not really guilty. That possibility leads us to Act 3, Scene 2, Hamlet's Mousetrap play. A troupe of actors have arrived at Elsinore. Hamlet asks them to perform a particular play before an audience of the court, including the king and the queen. The play is about a king who is murdered by his brother, a brother who then usurps his throne and marries his queen. In Hamlet's version, the usurper is then killed by his nephew. Hamlet's play within the play is a trope typical of the revenge tragedy. For example, in the Spanish tragedy, the revenge hero Hieronymo persuades his enemy to perform in a play with him, a play that Hieronymo will direct. The play calls for a scene of sword fighting, and Hieronymo, wielding a real sword, not a stage sword, kills his enemies on stage before the court audience. But there's a distinction to be made. Hamlet's play within the play is simply a rehearsal or a trial to see if Claudius is really guilty. In the following scene, Hamlet happens to observe Claudius in a private room at prayer, and he says, "Now I might do it, Pat. Now I can kill him." Then he hesitates. If he kills Claudius while Claudius is at prayer, Claudius will go straight to heaven. Significantly, we, the audience, will hear Claudius say that he is trying to pray, but he cannot. So he knows that his prayer cannot reach the ears of God. But Hamlet doesn't know that. This scene is at the center of a long-standing critical debate about Hamlet's indecisiveness or his lack of courage. Does it really make sense for him to delay his revenge when he sees Claudius at prayer, or is he just making excuses, looking for a reason not to act? The next scene may provide some answer to this critical question. The scene occurs in Gertrude's closet or her bedroom. Gertrude has sent for Hamlet. Evidently, she plans to upbraid him for causing such a scene with his Mousetrap play. But Hamlet will have none of it. Instead, he unleashes a tirade against her about marrying Claudius, even suggesting that she may have killed her husband, as bad as to kill a king and marry with his brother. Hamlet is ranting out of control, and his mother, fearing violence, cries out for help, at which point Polonius, who has been spying on the scene, hiding behind a curtain, makes a noise, and Hamlet stabs him through the curtain. So Act 3 ends with Hamlet having killed Polonius by mistake, thinking he was killing Claudius. If Hamlet would have killed Claudius at this moment, it would have been revenge, but not revenge according to the conventions of the revenge tragedy, because it would be done in a relatively private space, not before a public audience. But there are witnesses. In addition to the queen, the ghost of Hamlet's father appears here, visible to Hamlet, but not to his mother. And Hamlet says, "Do you not come, your tardy son, to chide, that, lapsed in time and passion, lets go by the important acting of your dread command?" And the ghost says, "This visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. But look, amazement on thy mother sits. Step between her and her fighting soul. Conceit in weakest body's strongest works. Speak to her, Hamlet." That's as much as to say, leave her alone. Avenge my death. Kill Claudius. Ultimately, Hamlet will avenge his father's murder. But from this point and throughout Act 4, the conclusion is very definitely in doubt. Whereas most revenge heroes are tightening their control and moving forward with definite plans to enact their revenge, Hamlet often seems not in control. Claudius sends him into exile into England with instructions for him to be executed there, and Hamlet escapes this fate by sheer luck, or perhaps by providence, as he suggests to Horatio. Meanwhile, in Act 4, Laertes returns from Paris seeking revenge for his father's murder, while his sister Ophelia goes insane with grief and drowns, perhaps a suicide. So at the beginning of Act 5, Hamlet is returned from England. He has no specific plan for the revenge. Claudius, meanwhile, hatches a plot with Laertes to kill Hamlet. In Claudius's plan, Laertes will avenge his father's death, and the threat from Hamlet will be disposed of. The fencing match has some of the conventional theatricality of the typical revenge play, but Claudius is in control. Claudius is directing the action. Neither of the grief-stricken victims who are seeking revenge for the murder of his father. In this final scene, Claudius and Laertes have contrived it so that Laertes will be using a foil with a poisoned tip, and just in case that doesn't work, Claudius has poisoned a glass of wine as a backup plan. Gertrude picks up the wine and drinks to her son's success. Claudius is in an untenable position. He can't make a scene of preventing her from taking the drink, because that will reveal that he has poisoned the wine. Meanwhile, Hamlet is winning the fencing match, but Laertes is able to stab him with the poisoned tip. Gertrude begins to feel the effects of the wine, announces that it has been poisoned. Laertes confesses that the tip of his foil was poisoned as well. Hamlet stabs Claudius. He has avenged his father's death, but in a way that really is distinctive among all the revenge plays of the period. At the end of the play, the stage is littered with dead bodies, but Hamlet remains somewhat innocent in comparison to the conventional revenge hero, who typically descend to a status no less bloodthirsty and evil than that of their enemy. For now, I'll conclude this video, but in another installment, I'll have something to say about the tradition of psychoanalytic criticism of the character of Hamlet. As always, if you have questions or comments, send me an email.